Hi, everybody. My name is Bill Sanders, and this is WatchArtSci, the art and science of watch collection. Today, I've got three things that I want to cover. First of all is the economics of buying and selling watches. One of the things, I suppose, is that especially if you're relatively new to this, one of the first wisdoms you'll hear is that Patek Philippe and Rolex are brands that keep their value. In other words, when you buy and you sell, Rolex and Patek Philippe are the ones you're going to be able to recover most of your money for. In order to take a closer look at that, what I did, I went to one of my favorite watch stores. It's called Bob's Watches. And the reason I like Bob's Watches, and it's mainly selling Rolex, but I believe they have some other things as well, is that they have the price that they'll pay you to buy your watch and the price that they sell it for. So the sell is what they'll pay you, and the buy is what you, the buyer, pays for it. Anyway, it gives you a very, very clear idea. And so what I did, I took two watches and I just randomly picked a day to take a look at it. And I picked the GMT and the Submariner. And then I wrote down all of the buying and the selling price, subtracted one from the other, and put up the difference. And then I averaged them out. Now, what you can see is that both of these watches, fairly popular watches, is that roughly about a quarter of the value of the watch, and about 25% of what you paid for it, is lost whenever you sell it. And depends on how you look at that. Either, well, that's pretty good because I lost 50% on my brand X watch. So let's take a closer look at that. Now, first of all, the buying and selling prices that Bob's has are not always the price versus the new price. If you buy a brand new Rolex, let's say one of the newer ones, one of the 6-digit reference ones, and then you turn around and sell it as a used watch, I don't know if these percentages are going to hold. Okay, so I'm not suggesting that they don't. I just don't know, because the ones I was looking at were pretty much I think they were buying and selling used watches. So if you look at that, if you bought like 4 transactions, that's 100%. So it's going to cost you every time you buy and sell at least a Rolex using these figures. It's going to cost you. It's not like, oh boy, it's going to cost me a few bucks. It's going to cost you a new watch after 4 transactions. But that's one thing to keep in mind. Now, on the other hand, if you go to places like eBay or Chrono24 and you go and you sell it on your own there or through one of the forums or the many different places, if you buy a used watch, let's say again, I'll take Rolex for an example. If you buy, we'll say a 5-digit reference from Rolex and sell it as a 5-digit reference back on eBay or one of the other places, you're not going to lose as much. I mean, stop and think about it. When you bought the watch, let's say you bought it from Joe, who was trying to sell it through a forum, and you paid, we'll say, $2,000, okay? And it's a certain reference and a certain type. You take good care of it, you wear it for a couple of years, and you see something you can't live without, which I happen to do all the time. You turn around and sell it, you're not going to probably lose as much as if you go to a store. Now, the good thing about places like Bob's, at least to me it is that you don't have to worry about getting a fake Rolex, and apparently there are a lot of them out there. That's one thing. You don't have to worry about not getting paid. I mean, you go to Craigslist, you might as well your chances there are very high. And so the good thing, like I said, going through a store. Now, this isn't going to a boutique or anything like that. Just to one of the mini Joma shop, uh, Torno. There's all kinds of online places you can go. But if you do, that's where you're going to have the highest differences. Whether you're buying a new and then selling it, or you're buying a used and selling it as a used again. But that should give you an idea. Now, if you have a reliable group or someplace where you can buy and sell between collectors, uh, your losses will go down significantly. Okay, so just a little economics and basic economics. Now, the next thing I want to look at is something that is very strange to me anyway. And these are brand haters. Somebody suggested, or they didn't suggest, they asked, are you a brand X hater? And I said, no, I'm not, because I don't have a certain brand of watch doesn't mean I'm a brand hater. There are a lot of brands I don't have, and there are a lot of brands I don't have and would like to have. But not talking about myself, I'm talking about people who really don't like certain brands. Unfortunately, one of the most popular brands seems to get pounded on the most, and that's poor old Rolex. Uh, it's I don't know why. I haven't been unkind. I have pointed out that, gee, I wish they'd enter the Grand Prix because I think they could win some prizes. But that doesn't mean I don't like them. Uh, However, I have heard people who are that way. And so, I mean, the Rolex people say, hey, there's some haters out there. They're not paranoid. There are. But the question is why? What do you hate a brand for? Now, let me try to explain what is the point of it. If somebody collects nothing but automatic watches that all cost less than $100, they're a watch collector. They just don't have the same taste that I have. On the other hand, if they collect nothing but top tier watches, the FP Journes and Leroy's, the upper crust, I've got nothing against that either. My taste, and I think most other watch collectors, having that stuff in your head is poison. It really is, because if I see any kind of watch that I like, I don't really care about the brand. Also, too, I'm not very good about buying and selling watches because I don't care. I'm not thinking, well, if I buy this, I'm not going to get my money back. I'm a collector. I don't have a brain in my head when it comes to buying something I really want. I do the research, but otherwise, I don't sit there with a calculator trying to figure out when I'm going to sell it, when I'm going to get back. Okay, so a lot of times people will meet somebody that they can't stand, and they have a Rolex or a Patek Philippe or a Vacheron Constantin or something, and I don't like that brand, and they'll find everything wrong with the brand that they can. Okay, well, just let me say this. For collectors, that really doesn't make a lot of sense. It's one thing to love the brand that you happen to like more than any others, and to be a brand hater is just sort of goofy, in my opinion. You see some jerk with there was this guy that on one of the cruises I was on. He had a beautiful, gorgeous Patek Philippe Nautilus. Gorgeous watch. Anyway, this guy had his face in his phone the whole time. I never got to talk to him about his watch. I thought, oh, what a jerk. Here he is on his beautiful cruise, and all he's doing is probably looking at his stock investments or something. Okay, so don't be a brand hater. You narrow yourself if, to do so. Okay, the third thing I wanted to talk about is watch snobbery, or watch snobs. This happened to me today. I was in this fancy jewelry store, and they sell, among other things, Patek Philippe's. And there's this really yummy Patek Philippe that I've seen going down in price in condition zero. Thanks a lot, China. Anyhow, So I thought, well, I'd like to meet it in person. So I asked the guy if he had that. No, he didn't have that, but he could get it from the Boston store or something that I could look at. And I said, well, no, that's okay. I just wanted to see what it looked like, up close and personal. And so I noticed he was looking at my watch. I had my Harboring 2 on, okay? Oh, by the way, I got to show you these. I got these cufflinks. They're little watch movements. So I don't know. I, they're not, probably, they may look tacky to some of you, but I enjoy them. Well, anyway, there I was with my Harboring. I went in to get a band. I got this really cool, this is blue alligator band for one of my other watches. So I had this guy on, and I was looking around. He said, what is it? I said, oh, it's a Harboring 2. And he says, never heard of it. In terms of being a watch snob, that's not a watch snob, that's a watch moron. There's a big difference between a snob and a moron. I don't know. If you see someone or you run into someone with a watch you don't know about, the thing to say is, tell me about your watch. So I did tell him. I told him the number of Grand Prix it had won, and this one in particular had won the Petit Aiguille, which I'm sure he had no clue what that was. But here was a guy, he was selling watches and never heard of it. Don't ever say that. It makes you either look stupid or something. It's such a dismissive thing to say. Now, as far as watch snob, there's this guy that calls himself the watch snob in one of the places. He's great because it's a persona, and he does know his watches. But it's more of a joke. Don't be a watch snob. I mean, if you can, the whole thing, the joy of watch collection is finding out about all kinds of watches. I wouldn't have found out about a lot of watches. Now, I admit freely that I was a little snobbish about ETAs, and still am to some extent. It's not so much being snobbery, I just like better movements. But I have learned a lot. There are a lot of, like what Harboring 2 did with ETAs was made it something really special. So, and they bought a lot of really good movements. And so a lot of the movements they ended up having were much better. So never, a real snob, again, I think you miss out on too much, and especially as watch collectors. Oh boy, I'm like a puppy dog wagging his tail when I see a watch I don't know anything about. Now, maybe a crummy watch, I don't care. But you want to find out about it. Maybe somebody collects that car. I don't know. Anyway, it's the whole notion of class. Now, one of the things that two things to remind yourself of, snobbish, why we shouldn't be snobs. First of all, is the Habsburg lip. The Habsburg lip were the royal family in Austria, and they did a little too much intermarriage, if you know what I mean. They were like, I don't want to talk about sort of the stereotype, a certain Southern stereotype about one's relationships with close relatives, but this royal families can often have that. So if you're too snobbish, you just end up with a Habsburg lip. The other thing that I had not long ago, I had this thing done with they send in for your ancestors. I've always been interested in my ancestors and DNA. And I was reading up all about that thing. And one thing I found out that we've got about, roughly on an average, about 2.5% of our DNA is from cavemen, from Neanderthals and Denisons. So, how could you be snobbish when, your great uncle is alley-oop? It's just, it doesn't make any sense. So anyhow, we're all sort of a more interesting group of people than a snob. And if you ever feel snobbish, just remember this guy. It doesn't help to be a snob, and you can learn from anyone. Some of the younger, this one guy, young guy just out of high school that I met over on the Vacheron Constantin. This guy, I couldn't believe it. He'd been loving watches all of his life. There's another kid in high school that's been that I've been communicating with on the WatchArtSci. He knows a lot of stuff about watches. So, it should be open-minded about these things, and you don't need to be a snob to anyone. One final thing about that, run into a fashion watch, Fabergé. Oh, Fabergé is, that's just a fashion watch. Yeah. The winner of, I think it was last year's Grand Prix, and it was for jewelry watches. There is a movement in it that is beyond anything that most of us can afford. And so be careful. Even with fashion watches, there's some of them that are just unbelievably good horological devices. Okay, that's all for today. See you next Friday. Bill Sanders for WatchArtSci. And remember the watch movement cufflinks. Tacky but fun.